The waitress walked to their table holding the little black box with the ring inside. I saw from afar the relaxed smiles disappear from their faces as soon as the small object shone in the dim light of the restaurant. They remained motionless. Her hands shook over the folded napkin as he quickly looked around, as if searching for cameras or an emergency exit. I could feel the air compress, even from meters away. She opened the box slowly, as if expecting it to be a joke or a mistake, but the deafening silence in the room only made the truth spread like poison. The ring I had once placed on her finger now rested there, exposed as irrefutable proof. The lover pursed his lips, pulling his hand away from her, as if he wanted to erase the invisible mark of that betrayal. I watched them from afar, but I could see every detail, her teary eyes, her ragged breathing, the sweat running down his temple. The waitress walked away silently, but the damage was already done. They knew that I knew. And, at that moment, the shame and panic on their faces were worth every second of the wait. She tried to pick up her cell phone. Maybe to call me. Maybe to make up an excuse. But the lover held his hand, as if it could still be hidden. I wondered how long they thought they could continue this charade. Days? Weeks? Months? How many lies were told while I planned surprises, while I believed the sweet words she whispered before bed? Memories mixed with the present. I remembered the scent I smelled on her skin the last night we made love. It was a different, stronger scent, and I asked about it. She laughed and said she had bought something new to please me. I believed. I always believed. Now reality stared me down cruelly. They weren't there by chance. The way he held her hand, the way she leaned her body toward him, it wasn't friendship, it wasn't innocence. They had crossed the line. And the hardest thing to accept was that it didn't seem like just lust. It felt like intimacy, something built with time and patience. My mind raced. Had they planned everything? Did he know she was married? Or was it just another lie she told? I wanted to explode, scream, get up and end it right there. But I held back. I wanted more than just a public scene. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they did. I wanted her to know that every word spoken, every hug, every passionate look had been turned into a direct blow to my chest. As I watched them rush to their feet, dropping their napkin and bumping into their wine glass, I realized there was something worse than the betrayal itself, the fear in their eyes. They didn't know what would come next. And that scared them. She held his arm as they left the restaurant, and I followed her steps with my eyes. Had she already thought about how she would explain that? Did you think I would just let it go? I knew her well enough to know she would try to turn things around, cry, beg. But nothing would erase the image of her sitting at that table, sharing secrets and smiles with another man. And the worst? The worst was yet to come. Because that same night, when they finally thought they had escaped, that they could regroup and confront me with their excuses and justifications, the police would knock on the door of his apartment. They would be taken away in handcuffs, not for betrayal, but for something much greater, something that was hidden beneath the surface of smiles and secret dinners. Something that would turn the personal scandal into a public disaster. I knew more than they realized. I had discovered enough to dismantle the perfect life they thought they were building. And this time, I wouldn't be the only one to suffer the consequences. But there was more. Something I didn't even expect to find. Something that would change the course of history and that, no matter how much I tried to control it, would slip through my fingers like sand. When the restaurant door closed behind them, I stood there, staring at the empty box on the table. A reminder of everything we once were. And a promise of what was to come. Welcome to the channel where intense and exciting stories come to life. Here, we do not support any type of betrayal. On the contrary, our fictional narratives show how infidelity can devastate lives, destroy families and leave deep scars. Get ready for a journey full of suspense, twists and emotions. Take a deep breath, and be ready to hear a shocking story that will hold your attention until the last second. Happy listening. Lucas adjusted his tie in front of the mirror and smiled slightly when he saw his reflection. The brown eyes, a little tired, bore the marks of someone who worked hard, but still maintained a warm glow. He had always been a man of routine. I liked stability, knowing exactly what to expect from each day. And, that Saturday, everything seemed to go according to plan. The restaurant reserved for the evening was elegant but discreet, one of Helena's favorites. He spent the morning organizing the details, checking the reservation, choosing the wine and separating the clothes he would wear. For more than 10 years, Lucas maintained this habit of surprising his wife on special dates, trying to rekindle the flames that time and responsibilities insisted on putting out. Helena was the type of woman who attracted attention without having to make an effort. He had long, dark hair, always well-groomed, and a confident posture. He worked as a manager at an art gallery, a space that seemed to fit perfectly with his refined personality. She enjoyed art, classical music and literature, but also knew how to lose herself in drama series on lazy weekends. The two met in college, during an exhibition. Lucas, more practical, studied administration, while Helena immersed herself in the world of visual arts. It was one of those immediate connections. He fell in love with the way she saw the world, colorful, vibrant, and full of hidden meanings. She, on the other hand, found a safe base in Lucas, someone who made her feel protected. The wedding came a few years later, followed by travel, professional achievements and many shared dreams. But, like any relationship, time brought challenges. Lucas began to dedicate himself more to work, seeking financial stability, while Helena immersed herself even more in her career, surrounding herself with artists, critics and social events. Still, Lucas never stopped believing in the strength of their marriage. That's why that night was important. He wanted to show Helena that, despite the difficulties, their love was still solid. When Helena came down the stairs, ready to leave, Lucas held his breath for a moment. The red dress hugged her curves elegantly, and her eyes sparkled in the soft light of the hall. "You look incredible," he said, moving closer to adjust a loose strand of her hair. "And you look especially charming today. Any special occasions?" Helena smiled, but there was something in her look that Lucas couldn't decipher. "It's always special when we're together," he replied, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling that was settling in his chest. They left the house and, on the way to the restaurant, they talked about light things, a new project at her work, plans to renovate her living room, and even about adopting a dog. Lucas paid attention to every word, but felt that, at some point, he had lost part of it. As if Helena was there physically, but her mind was somewhere else. At the restaurant, they were welcomed by old acquaintances. The waiter already knew your favorite orders, and the cozy atmosphere made it feel like you were in a family space. Lucas held Helena's hand on the table, feeling the softness of her skin. "I was thinking," he started, but was interrupted by her cell phone vibrating. Helena quickly glanced at the screen before turning off the notification, smiling hastily. "Sorry. Just a message from work. You can continue." Lucas tried to ignore the tightness in his stomach he felt at that moment. He was used to messages out of turn. He knew her job required flexibility, but lately, it seemed like the warnings were coming more frequently. Still, he continued. He talked about the trip he was planning for their wedding anniversary. A surprise to rekindle the romance. Helena smiled, but her eyes didn't light up like before. As the night progressed, Lucas noticed something was different. The conversation flowed, but there was an emptiness in the air, as if the words no longer carried the same weight. He tried to ignore the feeling, telling himself it was just tired. When they returned home, Helena went up to her bedroom while Lucas stayed in the living room, finishing a glass of wine. He looked at the photos of them spread across the bookshelf, trips, parties, moments that seemed so distant now. He wanted to believe that everything was fine. That the blank looks and forced smiles were just passing phases. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And that night, he decided he would do everything he could to find out what it was. The next day, while Helena left for an unexpected meeting, Lucas began to pay more attention to the details. In quick messages on the cell phone, in extended working hours and in repeated apologies. He didn't want to be suspicious, but the evidence was starting to accumulate like pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to put together. Even so, he remained calm. He continued with the birthday plans, with the affectionate messages throughout the day and the romantic dinners. He needed to believe that this was just a phase, that Helena was still the woman he had fallen in love with. But something changed. He began to observe the small gestures, the furtive glances at his cell phone, the rush to leave the house, the nervousness when receiving calls when he was next to him. Lucas knew he needed to be sure before confronting her. And that's how, a few weeks later, he found the perfect opportunity. A Saturday night. A dinner at a well-known restaurant. And a box with the wedding ring ready to be delivered. As he prepared himself for what was to come, he felt a mix of anger, sadness, and determination. He didn't know exactly how that night would end, but he was sure that after it, nothing would be the same again. Lucas spent the next week immersed in thoughts that seemed to grow like shadows around him. Each rehearsed smile from Helena, each message received and quickly deleted, fed that uncomfortable feeling that something was wrong. He tried to remain calm, looking for signs that his suspicions were just a figment of his imagination. But distrust, once planted, spread like a weed. The nights began to drag on. He would wake up in the middle of the night and stare at the ceiling, listening to the soft sound of Helena breathing beside him. She slept peacefully, but he could no longer relax. Goodnight kisses, once full of tenderness, now seemed hurried. Hugs had become rare, and conversations were shorter, as if any further exploration could expose something she was trying to hide. One night, while she was taking a shower, Lucas grabbed her cell phone from the bed. The screen was frozen, but notifications were visible. An unknown name appeared in a short message: "I can't wait to meet you again." His heart sped up. He felt his hands sweat and his throat dry. For a moment, he thought about unlocking his phone, but before he could try, he heard the sound of the bathroom door opening. He dropped the device in the same place and pretended to be leafing through a book. Helena came out wrapped in the towel, giving him a distracted smile. "What are you reading?" he asked, while drying his hair. "Nothing much," he replied, closing the book and trying to keep his voice steady. "Just passing the time." He knew he needed to act, but the fear of discovering the truth paralyzed him. "I preferred to believe that it was all just a misunderstanding. Maybe that message was just a mistake, a joke or something unimportant. But deep down, I knew it wasn't." In the following days, Lucas observed every detail. Helena came out more dressed up, wore perfumes that he had never seen before. Their schedules were increasingly unpredictable, and excuses for lateness became more elaborate. He tried not to confront her, waiting for the right moment to find out what was going on. Until, one Friday, while she was getting ready for a supposed dinner with friends, Lucas decided to follow her. He waited for her to leave and got into the car minutes later, keeping a safe distance. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and his mind was racing, imagining what he might find. Helena drove to a restaurant on the other side of town. It was a discreet place, far from where they usually frequented. Lucas parked on the other side of the street and watched as she got out of the car, straightened her dress and entered the salon. He waited a few minutes before getting out of the car and heading towards the entrance. "I felt my heart beating so hard that I could barely breathe." As soon as he entered, he looked around and saw her sitting at a table near the window. She was not alone. An elegant man, with dark hair and a confident look, was sitting in front of her. The two talked intimately, leaning towards each other. Lucas stood still for a moment, unable to believe what he saw. He thought about approaching, about confronting them right there, but something stopped him. "I needed to be sure. I needed to see more." He found a table in a far corner and sat down, keeping his eyes fixed on the two of them. The conversation flowed naturally, and the smiles between them were constant. Lucas felt his chest tighten when he saw Helena touching the man's hand on the table. She laughed at something he said, tossing her hair to the side in a way Lucas knew well. It was the same gesture she made when she was flirting. Minutes passed like hours. Lucas fought the urge to get up and end it, but he knew he needed to wait. It was then that the man leaned over the table and held Helena's face, kissing her slowly. Lucas felt the floor disappear. Everything he had feared was there, before his eyes. Doubts were crushed by the brutal reality of what he had just witnessed. He looked away for a moment, trying to catch his breath, but when he looked back at them, he saw Helena smiling in a way he hadn't seen in months. He left the restaurant unnoticed, his body shaking and his mind spinning. On the way home, every memory of their wedding seemed to take on new meaning. The hugs, the kisses, the nights shared now seemed empty, contaminated by betrayal. When he got home, he sat on the sofa and faced the silence. I felt anger, pain and overwhelming sadness. But most of all, I felt an uncontrollable need to act. He spent the night planning. He knew that Helena did not expect to be discovered. She trusted his image as a calm and trustworthy husband, someone who would never distrust her. But Lucas was determined to show that he wasn't as predictable as she imagined. The next morning, Helena arrived home with a smile on her lips and a sparkle in her eyes that Lucas hadn't seen in a while. She hugged him and said she missed him, but he just smiled back, hiding the storm that was brewing inside him. In the following days, Lucas maintained the facade. He was affectionate, attentive and even more present. I wanted Helena to believe that nothing had changed. Meanwhile, he continued collecting information, preparing for the right moment. When Saturday night finally arrived, Lucas was ready. He entered the restaurant, chose a discreet place and called the waitress. He gave precise instructions on what to do and waited. Minutes later, he saw Helena entering with her lover. They laughed and seemed carefree. Lucas felt anger boil inside, but he remained calm. He watched as they sat down and ordered drinks. Then, the waitress walked to their table, carrying the little black box with the wedding ring. Lucas watched from afar, seeing their smiles fade the moment they opened the box. The shock and despair on their faces was exactly what he expected. But, while Helena tried to hide her panic, Lucas knew that this was just the beginning. There was more to be revealed, something that would change everything irreversibly. And this time, neither she nor her lover were prepared for what would come next. Lucas remained motionless, leaning against the corner of the restaurant, while Helena and her lover's desperate gazes met across the table. The wedding ring, resting like an open sentence, reflected the dim light of the hall. Her lips trembled, and her short breaths made clear the desperation she was trying to hide. The man next to her leaned in to whisper something, but Helena backed away a little, moving away as if his touch was a weight now. Lucas felt a knot in his stomach when he saw that. She finally tasted shame, but had no idea the worst was yet to come. With slow and steady steps, Lucas crossed the room. The waitress's voice calling his name echoed behind him, but he didn't stop. When she reached the table, Helena looked up abruptly, her eyes wide, struggling to find words. Lucas. He raised his hand, stopping her. The lover adjusted himself in his chair, trying to look confident, but the slight tremor in his hands gave him away. Do you want to explain or should I do it for you? Lucas asked, his voice calm but carrying a cold weight. It's not what it seems, Helena finally managed to say, but her voice sounded empty, as if she didn't even believe her own words. Oh, isn't it? Lucas looked at the man next to her, studying every detail of his tense expression. Then maybe he can explain. The lover hesitated, cleared his throat and held out his hand. I'm Daniel, and I think we can talk like adults. Lucas cut in, crossing his arms. Adults? You're sitting with my wife, using the time I dedicated to her, living moments that I should be living. Do you want me to be civilized? Helena stood up abruptly. Lucas, stop it. That's not how it happened. I can explain, I promise. Explain what? He took a step forward. That you destroyed 10 years of marriage over this? He pointed to Daniel, who looked away. Helena tried to touch Lucas's arm, but he backed away. I loved you. His voice broke for a moment before returning firmly. I gave you everything, Helena. All. And you chose to throw that away because I was lost, Lucas. I needed something that you no longer gave me. He stared at her in disbelief. And you found this here? In this restaurant, with him? Lucas pointed again to Daniel, who was now getting up from the table, trying to get out of the situation. Not so fast, Lucas said, holding the man's shoulder. I'm not finished yet. Daniel pushed Lucas' hand away, trying to maintain his posture. He finished. You've already done your show. Leave her alone. At peace? Lucas gave a short, bitter laugh. Do you think it's over? Do you think you can just run away? Helena intervened, her voice trembling. Lucas, please, we can talk at home. It doesn't have to be this way. At home? He turned to her, his eyes burning. What house, Helena? The one you turned into a theater of lies? Silence spread throughout the restaurant. Customers looked out of the corner of their eyes, trying to pretend they weren't listening, but the tension was almost palpable. Daniel pulled on his coat, ready to leave, but Lucas spoke first. I know about the money. The sentence fell like thunder. Helena froze. Daniel stopped mid-motion, his back stiffening. What? Helena's voice almost didn't come out. Lucas opened the folder he carried with him and threw a series of documents on the table. Bank statements, transfers, contracts. You think I wouldn't know? Hidden transfers, accounts in the name of third parties, embezzlement of company money. I thought it was just betrayal, but you went further, didn't you? Helena covered her mouth, her eyes teary. I can explain, he can. Lucas countered, pushing more papers forward. Because I also discovered that here. He pulled out a printed photo. It was Daniel, sitting in an office, signing documents alongside a man Lucas recognized as an old business partner. You were deceiving me, but he was deceiving you too. This man, this Daniel, is not who he says he is. He used you. He used his connections, his position at the gallery, and, guess what? He already transferred the money. Helena staggered back, her hands seeking support on the table. Daniel tried to leave, but Lucas blocked the way. Where do you think you're going? Lucas growled. I've already notified the authorities. They should be arriving soon. Daniel's look turned to panic. You're lying, he stammered. I am. Lucas smiled, holding the phone. Want to try your luck? Helena collapsed into the chair, covering her face with her hands. Lucas, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know that you didn't know because you were too busy cheating on your husband to pay attention to what was really happening. Daniel tried to run, but at that exact moment, 2 police officers entered the restaurant. They went directly to the table, and Lucas just pointed. He is what you are looking for. Officers handcuffed Daniel as he protested, pleading his innocence. Helena was sobbing, but Lucas no longer felt anything. The pain had been replaced by emptiness. He picked up the ring from the table and looked at it for a moment before dropping it into her wine glass. Goodbye, Helena. He walked away as murmurs grew around him. The woman he loved, the person he trusted, was there, destroyed in the middle of a crowded restaurant. But Lucas didn't look back. Not this time. The cold of the night enveloped him as he walked out the door. The betrayal was exposed, and the secrets were finally revealed. But there was more to process. Much more. Because, even after everything, the emptiness inside him insisted on remaining. And he knew that this was just the beginning of the end. Lucas walked out of the restaurant without looking back. The cold night air felt sharp against the hot skin of his anger. The muffled sound of approaching sirens still echoed in his ears, but he didn't turn around. His hands were shaking, and he felt the bitter taste of everything that had fallen apart that night. Every step he took felt heavier, as if he was carrying the weight of years of lies and shattered illusions. He stopped in the parking lot, leaning against the car. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. I couldn't. The image of Helena, collapsing in the chair, and Daniel's panicked expression remained etched in her mind. But it was too late for regrets. The sound of quick footsteps brought him out of his thoughts. When he opened his eyes, he saw Helena running towards him, barefoot and with her dress wrinkled. Lucas! Wait! She shouted, panting. He crossed his arms, firmly, waiting for her to come closer. What do you want now? Don't you think you've done enough? She stopped a few feet away, tears still streaming down her face. I didn't know, Lucas. I didn't know he was using me. And do you think that changes anything? His voice sounded sharp. I don't care what you knew or didn't know. What matters to me is that you destroyed everything. Please listen to me. Just once. He took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. You have 2 minutes. I made a mistake, she began, swallowing hard. I was frustrated, alone. I felt like you didn't see me anymore. I just wanted to feel wanted, alive. Daniel showed up, and you chose him, Lucas interrupted. He chose to lie. You chose to betray me. I never wanted to lose you. Her voice broke. I just wanted something that would make me feel important again. Lucas gave a bitter laugh. Important? Do you think this is an excuse? I was there, Helena. I was always there. You just needed to talk to me. But instead he decided to stab me in the back. She reached out, trying to touch his arm, but he backed away. I made a mistake, Lucas. I know that. But I didn't know he was cheating on me too. I swear I didn't know about the money, the transfers, and how do you expect me to believe you now? He shook his head in disbelief. After everything I've seen, how can I believe anything you say? Helena sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I loved you. I still love you. Lucas felt his chest tighten, but he pushed the feeling away. Love? That's not love, Helena. Love is trust, it is respect. And you destroyed all of that. Please. Let me fix this. Let me show that I can change. There's nothing left to fix. He opened the car door. He finished. Helena grabbed the door before he could close it. You can't just leave me like this. We have a story, a life. Lucas pulled the door slowly, forcing it to release. A story you deleted. Good luck explaining that to the police. He took off with the car, leaving Helena standing in the middle of the parking lot. The headlights illuminated her face for a moment before disappearing down the road. Lucas drove aimlessly, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. He didn't know where to go. Their house no longer felt like a home, but a tomb of destroyed memories. Then he headed towards the office. When he arrived, the building was empty. He turned on just a dim light and threw himself into the chair. He stood there, looking at the papers spread out on the table, the same ones that proved Helena's betrayal and Daniel's frauds. Hours passed until his phone rang. It was an unknown number. For a moment, he thought about ignoring it, but he answered. Lucas? Helena's voice sounded on the other side, weak. Please don't hang up. He closed his eyes, holding back the urge to hang up. What do you want? They arrested Daniel. He confessed everything. Excellent. Does this solve anything? No. But I need to see you. I need to talk to you. We've said enough. Please, her voice faltered. Just one more time. Lucas was silent. Against his will, he accepted. When she arrived at the apartment where she was staying, Helena opened the door with red and tired eyes. Talk quickly, he said, entering without much desire. She closed the door and stood nervously. I asked you to come because I can't deal with this alone. Lucas crossed his arms. It's not my problem anymore. I know. But I hurt you, Anne. I hurt myself too. Helena, you still don't understand, do you? This isn't about you now. This is about everything you destroyed. She cried again, but this time she didn't try to touch him. I'm very sorry. I know this doesn't fix anything. But I needed to say. Lucas sighed, feeling the weight of her words. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you. I don't expect you to forgive. I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Lucas turned to the door. If that were true, none of this would have happened. He left, leaving her behind once again. This time, however, he felt no anger. Just tiredness. In the car, he looked at his phone. A message was waiting for him, not from Helena, but from someone unexpected. It was from a saved number like Laura. I hope you are well. If you need to talk, I'll be here. Lucas looked at the message for a few moments before responding. Thanks. I think I'll need it. He threw the phone on the passenger seat and started the car. There was something different that night. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was ready to move on. Lucas drove through the almost deserted streets without paying attention to the traffic lights or the movement around him. The night seemed darker than usual, heavy like a cloak that refused to be lifted. Helena's words still echoed in her mind, mixed with the sound of the car engine and the accelerated beating of her heart. He knew that meeting in the apartment shouldn't have happened. It should have been the end point, but instead it opened even more wounds. The phone vibrated on the passenger seat, but he didn't look. I knew it wasn't Helena. She had already said everything she could and was now dealing with the consequences of her choices. But there was another message waiting, Laura. The name appeared in his mind like a spark in the darkness. Someone who, unexpectedly, showed up when he needed them most. When he finally stopped the car, he realized that he had driven to the riverbank, a place where he often went to think. He got out of the car and walked to the edge, feeling the cold wind cut into his face. He looked at the dark water, which reflected the distant lights like small fragments of something broken. That's how he felt, fragmented. He took out his cell phone and opened Laura's message. His hands were still shaking. I need to talk. Can we meet? He typed, hesitating before pressing the send button. Seconds later, the answer arrived. Of course. Where are you? Lucas looked around. I wanted a place where I could talk without being interrupted, without curious looks or judgments. He sent the location and put away his cell phone. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he needed to get something off his chest, even though he didn't know exactly what he expected to hear. Laura arrived about 20 minutes later. She slowly got out of the car and looked at him with a mixture of concern and caution. He had a calm, almost comforting presence, as if he knew exactly what to say without needing words. Hi, she said, approaching. Lucas just nodded, unable to speak immediately. She waited, respecting the silence until he was ready. I don't even know where to start. Then start in the middle, replied Laura, with a slight smile. Lucas gave a short, bitter laugh. I discovered that the woman I spent 10 years sharing my life with was cheating on me. And not only that, she was involved with a scammer who used her name to embezzle money and almost ruined everything I built. Laura crossed her arms and tilted her head slightly. And you exposed everything? Yes. At the restaurant where they used to meet. With evidence and even the police involved. He shook his head. And you know what's worse? Part of me still has feelings for her. Laura didn't respond immediately. He let the silence hover for a moment before asking, "And what do you feel?" "Anger. Longing. A little bit of everything. I loved her. And somehow, some of that love is still here. But at the same time, I can't forget what she did. It's as if every good memory has been contaminated." "And you think this feeling is wrong?" Lucas stared at the ground, fighting his emotions. "I wish it were. I wish it were easier to just feel angry and get it over with. But it's not. I wonder if I did the right thing. Whether I exposed everything because she deserved it or because I wanted revenge." Laura walked over and put her hand on his arm. "Maybe it was a little of both. And that's okay. You have been betrayed. He was hurt. You don't need to feel guilty for wanting justice." "Justice?" Lucas laughed again, but this time with less bitterness. "It seems more like revenge than justice. So what do you want now?" The question caught Lucas off guard. He didn't know how to answer. "I wanted to move forward, but every step felt stuck in the past." "I don't know," he confessed. "And I think that's what scares me the most." Laura squeezed his arm lightly. "Then maybe you just need time." He looked at her, searching for something in her eyes that made him believe that. "Found understanding." The two remained silent, watching the water for a few minutes. Lucas felt some of the weight lift off his shoulders, but he knew there was still a long way to go. "Thanks for coming," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Whenever you need it," Laura replied. She left him there, alone with his thoughts. When her car disappeared down the road, Lucas returned to his own car but did not go home. Instead, he drove to the office once more. He needed to get busy. Inside the office, the folders with Daniel's case documents were still on the table. Lucas looked at them with a mix of relief and frustration. The scammer was arrested, and Helena would have to answer for her involvement, even though she claimed she didn't know anything. But there was something incomplete about that story. While examining the papers, he found a contract signed by Helena. It was authorization to access the corporate account, something she swore she was not aware of. Lucas squinted, analyzing the signature. It felt right, but something was wrong. He picked up the phone and made a call to the lawyer handling the case. "I need you to check something for me. Can the signature on that contract be forged?" The answer came hours later. "It is highly likely that it was forged." Lucas felt a tightness in his chest. If that were true, then perhaps Helena had been manipulated more than he realized. But would it be enough to change how he felt? He put the documents away and closed the folder. "I needed to sleep. I needed to think clearly before making any decision." When he got home, the silence felt heavier than ever. He sat down on the sofa and picked up his cell phone. Another message from Laura was there. "I hope you're better. Anything, I'll be here." Lucas smiled slightly, but didn't respond. He put the phone away and closed his eyes. There were still many unanswered questions, but for the first time in weeks, he felt there was a chance to start over. Even if it meant facing everything that was yet to come. Lucas woke up that morning feeling the accumulated weight of the last few days pressing on his chest. The bedroom curtains remained slightly open, letting soft light invade the room. The silence seemed louder than usual. He stood up slowly, as if every movement required effort, and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The tired eyes, the deep circles under his eyes, the rigid face, it was difficult to recognize who he had become. The lawyer's connection from the day before still echoed in his mind. The possibility that Helena had been manipulated changed everything, but it also changed nothing. The betrayal still existed. The pain, the breach of trust, the emptiness. He couldn't ignore these feelings. No matter how much he tried to rationalize the facts, his heart insisted on remembering every detail of what he had witnessed. The phone vibrated. It was a new message from Laura. He looked at the screen for a moment before opening it. "How are you today? I hope you were able to rest." Lucas thought about ignoring it, but ended up responding. "A little better. Thanks for asking." He put his cell phone aside and went to the kitchen to make some coffee. Every movement felt automatic, as if his body was functioning out of pure obligation. But deep down, I knew that routine was my anchor. Something that kept him grounded in reality while everything around him seemed to fall apart. Hours later, still lost in thought, Lucas received another call. This time, it was from the lawyer. "I have news about the case. Daniel reached a deal and is cooperating with the police." Lucas felt his stomach turn. "Is it Helena?" "She was released on bail, but will have to answer in court." Daniel stated that she really didn't know anything about the scheme, but the judge wants further investigation. He sighed, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. Part of him wanted to believe Helena. She wanted to accept that she had also been a victim. But another part knew that didn't change the fact that she had chosen to cheat, and that choice continued to hurt him more than any other mistake. Hours later, Helena appeared at the door. His eyes were red, his face haggard. She held a small bag, as if she knew that this conversation would be final. "Can I come in?" he asked, in a weak voice. Lucas hesitated for a moment before making room for her to pass. "What do you want, Helena?" "Talk to you." "Explain." He crossed his arms, keeping his distance. "I've heard your explanations before. But you didn't hear everything." She swallowed hard. "I was naive. I believed his words. I let him manipulate me because I was needy, because I felt alone. But I never wanted to destroy what we had. And yet he destroyed it." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control the tears. "I know. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life dealing with this. But please, Lucas, tell me you believe I didn't know about the money." He was silent. Every fiber of his being fought against that idea, but deep down he knew it was true. He nodded slowly, and Helena let out a sob. "That doesn't change what happened. I know. I can't forgive you, Helena. I tried, but I can't." She swallowed and nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive either. I just needed you to know." The two were silent for a moment, until Helena picked up her bag and walked towards the door. "I really loved you, Lucas. I will always love." He didn't respond. He just watched as she left, closing the door behind her. And at that moment, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't relief. It was just the certainty that that chapter had finally ended. In the following days, Lucas threw himself into work. "I avoided overthinking and focused on what I could control." Laura continued sending messages, and he finally decided to accept the invitation for coffee. They talked for hours. Laura was light, understanding, and didn't force anything. Over time, Lucas began to feel something he thought he would never feel again: hope. As the months passed, Helena's trial brought more revelations. Daniel was convicted, and Helena only received a fine and community work, as the investigation proved that she had no direct involvement in the scheme. Despite this, her reputation was ruined. The gallery where she worked fired her, and she had to move to a small apartment, far from the life she knew. The visits to the lawyers and the judgmental looks in the courtroom left their marks. Even so, Helena made an effort to start over, even though she knew she would never erase the mistakes she had made. Lucas, on the other hand, moved on. He and Laura started going out more frequently and, little by little, a new relationship began to form. Unlike before, he allowed himself to be more cautious, more attentive to the signs. One night, while walking with Laura after dinner, Lucas looked up at the stars and smiled for the first time in a long time. It wasn't a forced smile. It was true. He knew he still had scars. I knew some memories would remain painful. But he also knew he was ready to leave the past behind. Helena, sitting alone in the apartment, looked at their wedding photo, still framed on the shelf. Her fingers touched the ring she kept in a little box, as a constant reminder of what she had lost. And Daniel? Imprisoned, without money, without allies, he saw his life falling apart before him. The people who once supported him now avoided him, and he began to face the consequences of his choices alone. Each one followed different paths, carrying the marks of what happened. But in the end, only Lucas found a true fresh start, proving that, even after pain, it was still possible to find happiness. With this, the story comes to an end. Leave your comment saying what you thought and share your opinion about the characters' choices and outcomes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Remember, this channel does not support any type of cheating. Thanks for following along this far and see you in the next story.